Santa Monica, California, spring 2021. The beach was always just a few blocks away. But Ivy hadn't touched the sand in months. Her therapist encouraged connection to place, but Ivy mostly connected to stillness, to quiet grocery aisles. To her bathtub at 2 a.m., to the blinds that remained shut no matter the weather. She was 33, an art conservator on medical leave, recently diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder contamination subtype. Her life revolved around gloves, bleach, and ritual. She didn't tell people she was lonely, just taking time. The first time she saw him, he was dancing in the alley behind her building, badly, joyfully. A man with too much energy for the world to contain. His hair was in wild curls, his shirt backwards, and he was lip-syncing to something blasting through his earbuds. He caught her watching from her kitchen window, grinned, and bowed like a circus act. That was how Julian entered her life. He knocked on her door the next day with a single misshapen muffin and an introduction. Julian with a J and ADHD with a vengeance. She didn't let him inside, but she accepted the muffin with gloves and wiped it down before eating. He didn't flinch, just said, "Neurospicy meets neurocautious. This could be interesting." He had moved in downstairs and made his presence known immediately. Chimes on his balcony, yoga at sunrise, impromptu hallway poetry readings. It irritated her. It fascinated her. She began watching him like one watches the tide, expecting repetition, yet finding variation every time. He noticed her routines, the 5 locks on her door, the way she flinched when handed anything directly. But he never mocked it, he just adjusted, left notes instead of calling, waved instead of knocking. They became something between friendship and orbit. He invited her to the beach. She declined 10 times. On the 11th, she said yes, at sunset when the crowds were gone and the light was soft enough to hide behind. Julian didn't walk ahead or behind her. Just beside, he spoke about being off meds sometimes, how his brain could shift from brilliance to rubble in a day. "People think I'm free-spirited," he said, "but mostly I'm afraid of stopping. Stillness is where the shame creeps in." She told him about the rituals, the voice in her head that convinced her her breath could kill someone, that love was too dirty to be safe. They sat on the sand, gloved hand resting near bare one, and said nothing for a while. It was the closest she'd come to peace in years. Their bond grew in strange, specific ways. They watched thunderstorms from his window and counted raindrops like stars. He built her a safe box filled with trinkets, sanitized and labeled, just so she could feel spontaneous in controlled conditions. She edited his poems when his thoughts ran too fast for grammar. He told her he loved her in the middle of a grocery store. She was crying, paralyzed in front of the produce section, overwhelmed by a stranger coughing nearby. He didn't reach for her, just crouched beside her and whispered, "Even like this, especially like this." She didn't say it back right away. She couldn't, not until weeks later, when he disappeared for 2 days, spiraling, unmedicated, unreachable. She found him on the roof, lying flat, staring at the sky. "Don't go," she said. "I'm exhausting," he replied. "I'm exhausting too." That night they made a promise, no pretending, no fixing, just witnessing, just staying. Now 3 years later, they live in a house 5 blocks from the beach. There's a shelf of color-coded pill bottles by the door, a whiteboard for brain days, gloves by the sink, poems on the fridge. He still dances in the alley, she still watches, and sometimes she dances too. Because love doesn't always arrive clean or convenient. Sometimes it's the color of glass, fragile, specific, and stunning in the right light.
The first time Amal saw Maya, she was barefoot in the rain outside the pharmacy on West Belmont. Her hair clung to her cheeks like vines, her eyes locked on the sky like it owed her something. He should have walked past, but Eli, with his own storm clattering behind his ribs, knew the look of someone trying not to drown. Maya spoke in metaphors. She called her bipolar episodes, the tides, and Eli's panic attacks, echoes of a war you forgot you fought. They met every Wednesday in Grant Park. feeding pigeons in silence until one of them found the courage to speak. He learned she'd stopped taking her meds 2 months ago. She learned he hadn't ridden the train since his father's funeral 3 years earlier. Together, they were fragile and electric. On Halloween, she wore a black dress and said, "I want to feel beautiful without unraveling." Eli, who hadn't hugged anyone in 8 months, said nothing, just held her hand like it was a thread holding the world together. But the world stitched together by damaged hands, sometimes tears. December came sharp. Maya's words grew louder, looser. She disappeared for 3 days. When Eli found her outside Union Station, shoeless again, crying because she could hear clocks ticking from inside the moon, he sat beside her on the cold concrete and said, "I'm not scared of your mind. I'm scared of losing it." She checked into a facility that night. Eli wrote to her every day. Maya responded once a week, and though her letters were shorter, steadier, they held warmth like coffee mugs on frozen mornings. On Valentine's Day, she returned to Grant Park. Her hair was shorter, her eyes were clearer. They fed the pigeons in silence. This time, Eli spoke first. "Let's build something that survives the rain." She smiled. Not wildly, not with the desperation of mania, but with the quiet relief of someone who finally felt seen. The sky stayed dry that day, but neither of them looked up.
When the lights flickered, setting New York City, winter 2006. The power had gone out across the Lower East Side when Lena met Jude Aine. A flickering candle in the hallway of their apartment building revealed his silhouette. Barefoot, notebook in hand, muttering to himself about time being a liar. She was used to eccentricity. What she wasn't used to was someone who spoke her language without asking what it meant. Lena had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder 3 years prior. Her world spun on the edge of emotional cliffs, where love and fear slept in the same bed. Jude lived with schizophrenia. He spoke to the stars like old friends, left post-it notes on the walls that said things like, "Don't trust mirrors today," or "You're not broken, just rearranged." They became a pair of misfits orbiting each other's chaos. By January, they were sharing cigarettes and secrets on the rooftop. Jude showed her his paintings, fractured cityscapes, always missing people. Lena played him old voicemail recordings from her late mother, the only voice that ever made her feel like she wasn't too much. They never used words like love. They didn't have to. But February came bitter and cruel. Lena had a breakdown after her therapist moved out of state. She vanished for 2 days, leaving only her red scarf on Jude's doorknob. When she returned, her wrists were bandaged, her eyes empty. "I didn't want to die," she whispered. "I just wanted it to stop." Jude didn't speak. He walked to the wall, took down a painting and tore it in half. "No more ghosts," he said, "just us, real and cracked and stubborn." Lena moved in that night. The weeks blurred. Some nights, he heard voices that told him she'd leave. Some mornings, she begged him not to disappear into the noise. But they made a pact. When it got too loud, they'd light a candle. No questions, just presence. One night in March, the lights flickered again, another citywide blackout. They sat together, backs against the kitchen wall. The city's silent around them. "I'm scared of how much I need you," she confessed. He took her hand and smiled, tired, but certain. "Then let's be brave." Outside, the city waited. Inside, they were learning how to stay lit in the dark.